Hello, I'm author and founder of the Right Women Book Fest, Heather Brooks, and we are excited to have Christyn West here to talk with us about beta reading for 2021 Right Women Book Fest. Christyn has a degree in creative writing, so she's always had a love of reading and writing. Christyn and I met via TikTok, aka Book Talk for many of us, authors and writers and readers. I saw her cute post about how much she loves beta reading. It was really well done. And that post kind of took off, and that's how I saw her, and here we are. Christyn, it's so nice to have you today. We appreciate your time.
Hello.
Hi, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us all about your beta reading journey. I know that it's been an adventure starting with hobby, and now you're a professional beta reader, and I may have some questions along the way. So
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess the first question is, what is beta reading? Because I know a lot of people in this industry, especially if they're just starting off, have no idea what this is. I know at the beginning of the summer, I did not know what it was. I'd never heard the term before. So I really started from the ground up here. But what a beta reader is they are a test reader of an unpublished piece of writing, generally of literature of some form, who gives feedback to the author from the point of view of an average reader. So basically that means an author will ask for feedback, and then a beta reader will give feedback as if they're just a normal, everyday, average reader. So I guess the next thing is, like, who can be a beta reader? Well, beta readers can be just about anybody. You know, they can be and often are like close friends and family members, people that the author trusts to give them feedback, because it's really scary asking for strangers' opinions.
yeah.
But in my experience, it is generally wise for authors who are seeking beta readers out to make sure that the beta reader has some form of qualification of some sort. So like, you don't, just because you can read or just because you like to read doesn't mean that you're qualified to be a beta reader. Kind of in the same way that just because you like to eat doesn't make you qualified to be a sous chef, you know? Right. So I would say that some qualifications that people would need to be a beta reader, like an average person who wants to get into this, they need to know how to read, obviously. And they need to be able to comprehend what they're reading. So basically they need to not just like skim through, and then if the author said, okay, so what did you think of this part? And then you're just, I don't know what I just read. Because that doesn't do any good to anybody.
Comprehension. There needs to be a good reading comprehension.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, and then it would be really helpful if they knew how to write, not necessarily that they're good at writing, but just they have like, okay, this is a verb, this is a noun, that kind of thing. Just have some general knowledge about writing. And then I would also argue that it would be really helpful for beta readers, especially people who read fiction, know how to write a story. So you know what a character is, you know what a plot is, you know what a character arc is, plot lines, plot holes, that kind of thing. You want to know what those type of things are so that you can spot them in the manuscript. So so basically a reader needs to know how to write, know how to read, know how to comprehend, and understand what makes a story a story. I think the last thing that I would say that a beta reader needs to have is tact. You don't want to offend your author. You don't want to offend the person that you're reading for. You know, when you give feedback, you don't want to give something back, even if the manuscript wasn't as good as it could be. You don't want to look at the manuscript and say to the author, this sucks. I can't believe you made me read this garbage. Like that's, that is no good to anybody.
Yeah, you probably won't get hired for that job by that author again either.
Precisely, yeah. So basically you need to take the brutality out of being brutally honest.
Right. So good diplomacy with your feedback.
Precisely, yes. Oh, yes. So then I like to move on from that, like who can be a beta reader, who should be your beta reader. So
from an author's perspective.
From an author's perspective, yes. So who should be your beta reader as an author? Like I said before, anybody can be a beta reader if they have those qualifications that I mentioned before. So like I said, also, oftentimes writers ask their close friends or their close relatives for their opinions. And it's certainly convenient to ask those people because often they're like right there or they're just a phone call away. They're super easy to get a hold of. However, I would argue that close friends and relatives are actually not the best beta readers for you. And the reason I say that is because A, they're biased. So unless you're my mother, they're not going to be completely honest with you. So they're going to be more like, oh, you did a good job, or oh, this is great, without actually giving you the feedback that an author should want. And because they're close, because your friends and family are close to you or easily accessible, I would say that most often they're not punctual at all about giving you feedback. They're like, oh, I'll get to it because you're family, so there's no point in rushing, right? So, and also because you, the author, have a vested emotional interest in what they have to say. So like I said before, my mother, while biased in my favor, is brutally honest. And because I have a vested emotional interest in what she has to say about my writing, I would say that she's not the best beta reader for me because I don't want her to tell me what's wrong with the story. I want her to read it and say, oh, this was great. Oh, you did a good job. Oh, I'm so proud of you. I don't want her to tell me what's wrong. I just want her to tell me good. So it hurts. Like in my case, if my mom was to be brutally honest with me with my manuscript, I'm going to be a little bit butthurt over that. So you want to have
naturally.
Naturally. Yeah. So you want to have feedback from somebody, or you want to have a beta reader who will give you feedback that you're not going to get offended over because you actually care about what they think. So let's see. What kind of services do beta readers offer? So the kind of services that that beta readers offer is truly dependent upon the beta reader and the author. So like, for example, my method, whenever I get a client and I start my beta reading process, what happens is I firstly chat with them via either my Instagram or my TikTok account. That's usually where I find my clients. So those sometimes, and hopefully soon, it'll be through word of mouth. But I'll contact them and we'll chat about their story and what kind of feedback they're looking for to make sure that I, as a beta reader, and they, as an author, and their story are a good fit. So after we have discussed and I've decided to take the project on, we'll figure out a time that suits us both for me to start my beta reading. And then we discuss pricing because that's got to be at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
And then I get to work and I read through the manuscript and I annotate the manuscript as I'm reading through it. And then I write. Then when I finished annotating the manuscript, what I like to do at the end is I write the author or my client a letter with all of the feedback that I didn't get to or didn't have time to expand upon in my annotations. So then is when I usually respond to the specific feedback that the author is looking for. I also tell them their strengths and I offer suggestions or ask questions just to help move the conversation along in the manuscript. And then after I finish that, then I send them their letter and the annotated manuscript back. And then most of the time that finishes the process, but sometimes the author does like to talk to me after the fact because they have further questions, which is always really cool to hear what authors have to ask. So
yeah, and I think that the benefit too from the author's side, I'm turning this light down a little because it's blinding my own face. I'm like, is that there's pressure also on the beta reader if they're a family member. Like, okay, my sister does beta read my work, okay, but I trust but I did have to reassure her a bunch of times that is fine to give me feedback. Actually, I was an artist before I was ever a writer, and I'm used to critical feedback. But also on her side, there's this stress and pressure on your friends and family if you ask them to do that, to, you know, give you feedback. What if they're busy? You know, what if they hurt your feelings? I'm sure that it's, you know, on both sides of it if you're a little too close to the beta reader, unless you're your mom, of course.
Yes.
And from her perspective, she's just got to give you that feedback.
Yes. She's very good at feedback, but I don't want her feedback.
Right.
Just tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Yeah. So actually, on kind of talking about that, there is obviously always a chance that you're going to get bad feedback. As an author, you might get bad feedback from a beta reader. And I got a couple of things to say about that, because obviously it always hurts when you get, like, it always hurts just a little bit whenever you get a bad comment, or like a question, or when somebody points out a pretty obvious flaw in the manuscript and then you just feel dumb because you were like, why didn't I see that? Right. I know that I've had that a couple of times. You're like, how did I not see that problem?
That's what beta reading's for. It's a dress rehearsal.
Yes, precisely. That's a
because
great way
you will miss things. You will.
Yes. Yes. So, you know, one-man show people who write and beta read for themselves and edit for themselves, you know, I say that's awesome that you have the ability to do all of that, but I would strongly urge you to find at least one person to read your manuscript before you go on and continue on with the publishing process, just to make sure you're not missing anything. But with the bad feedback, like, first of all, two authors who are like searching for beta readers and they get they get a bad review or they get bad feedback, meaning like they get feedback that kind of hurts their feelings, not that the feedback itself was poorly done, if that makes sense. So I would say that, first of all, authors, you're not going to please everybody, you know, like you're always going to have a reader that doesn't like your work, and that's okay.
Is this part of your process too? Like, for example, you know, I noticed I might get a bad review from somebody who doesn't like, for example, spice in their books, but even though I'm very upfront about the fact that it's in there, but if they read it and then they're like, oh, I didn't like the spices, you're like, okay, so is this part of your process too? It's like, are there things that you don't enjoy very much, so you know you're not going to be a good beta reader for it? Or, you know?
That's a great question. I personally haven't yet read anything that I found distasteful to the point of me not wanting to continue reading. Obviously, with lots of stories, there's going to be, like with all stories, something bad has to happen, otherwise it's not a good story. Right. But I've read torture scenes. I have read instances of SA. I've read all sorts of things that are pretty distasteful, but nothing for me yet. I've been like, I can't read this anymore. But there are beta readers out there who do have triggers, who do have things that they don't want to read. And if that's the case, there should be no pressure at all between the beta reader and the author if the answer is, you know what, I don't think we're going to be a good fit. Right. And there shouldn't be any pressure even halfway through the story. If for whatever reason the beta reader decides that they can't finish reading the story, while it can be disappointing, I would say that there should be, on both sides, there should be grace, and there should be, you should be able to walk away from it without either side being offended, if that makes sense.
I personally, I expect bad feedback. Like I expect there to be, I call it critical feedback. And then, so like, especially if I'm paying somebody, if I'm paying a editor or beta reader or somebody, if there's issues in there and it's some things that are, for example, for me, my stories are kind of complicated. If a thread doesn't connect, or if it's supposed to be night and it's day suddenly, those kinds of, you know, things, it's like that glare out to the regular reader, like, wait a minute, she just had a candy bar in her hand or whatever. I expect those things to be like, you know, that's what you're paying for, is to have somebody say, hey, maybe even something doesn't sound right, or it clanks, you know, that it's supposed to be funny. So you're like, I think this was supposed to be funny, but I didn't like it funny or whatever. And then I take that, that as like, and I think, do I agree? Because I have to agree with the feedback. I mean, I can hear the feedback, but I may or may not agree with it. And I think that's just having been in the criticism business first, but having been criticized for so long, I think I'm in a better place to accept that. But I've definitely seen authors and like for online forums and stuff very upset about their negative beta reader feedback. And I'm like, that's what they're for. Like literally, I mean, if they're just going to shine you on, just hire somebody to just tell your mom to read it, just like or tell you it's awesome or whatever.
Ego, instead, if that's what you're looking for. Yeah. So that actually is that's a great point. I have also seen authors get really, really upset over a bad review. Sometimes sometimes I've seen authors get upset because they had a bad review. They're like, oh no, my whole story is terrible. I have to cancel, have to push back the publishing date or whatever it is because they got one bad feedback from one beta reader. Right. And while I can understand, especially if it's your first time, I can understand that initial panic of, oh no, this isn't perfect. Yeah. We all go through that. Oh, it sucks. I mean, we all go through that. Yeah. Every author worth their salt has had that wrong 100%. So, but I would say, first of all, you're the author. In the end, it's up to you. You get to decide what happens. You don't have to listen to anybody if you don't want to. But again, any author worth their salt is going to want to hear feedback so that they can make their story better and make it as the best that it absolutely can be. I've also heard authors before talk about how annoyed they get with certain types of feedback from beta readers. So like once on an online, like it was a video on TikTok, I think I saw an author talk about how they got really annoyed whenever beta readers make a comment on a situation or a scene or whatever, and they say, oh, I wouldn't react that way. Now, to give the author credit, if that's not the type of feedback that they were looking for, I can see how that would be frustrating and annoying. I totally can see. I have had feedback, like I've had people give feedback on my own writing where they got really caught up on one particular point and they wouldn't let that one point go, to the point where they were ignoring the rest of the story because they were so caught up on this one problem. Right. So I can totally see as an author how that would be annoying. However, if the beta reader is doing their job and giving you feedback from the point of view of an average reader, and they're being tactful and they're doing what they're supposed to do, you kind of have to expect that and not be annoyed by that. Or you can be annoyed, but you still need to expect it, because they're doing their job.
And venting about it online, to me as an author, when I see that kind of venting, two things, like just railing against some beta reader for giving them what they felt was feedback that the author wanted. Like I've seen it, or complaining about paying beta readers, which is another thing I have seen happen, is that some authors think that you shouldn't even, that it's not even a paid, not even, you shouldn't pay, that the beta readers are just out there and they're waiting to read your beta, your beta or your arc or whatever. And I'm like, that's labor. No, they totally entitled to be paid. If you can find 100%. Free ones or volunteers or co arc buddies or something like that's great. But if you can't, not arc, but first draft. Okay. For if you can find people that are qualified and can do that, that's awesome. But otherwise, just like you're getting your cover, unless you can make your cover, you got to pay somebody to do it, just like getting your edits. And can you tell us the difference between an editor and a beta reader?
Yes, of course. So an editor, while like they're I can see how people would think that they're somewhat synonymous. They're not. They're very similar, but they're not the same thing. So an editor focuses on the physical structure of the writing. So they're the people who, if you misspelled something or if a sentence was weak, they're the ones who will go through and craft the sentence to be strong or change the spelling or whatever. They focus on the structure of the writing. A beta reader focuses on the structure of the story. So a beta reader will look at the story and make sure that there are no plot holes, that the characters are consistent, that setting is present and strong, those kind of things. So they're very, very similar. And you can have editors who will look at the structure of the story, and you can have beta readers that will look at the structure of the writing, but you can't expect them both to do both jobs because they're two very different
And I
jobs.
think editing is a lot more expensive than beta reading.
Way more expensive. I think I just looked it up yesterday, and I was blown away at how expensive it was. I was like, okay, I gotta start saving up for it.
And that's why it's hard for indie authors who especially begin. This is why the book, I think my book fest, the Right Women Book Fest, is the reason, part of the reason I started it is like a support network for women authors. But what it's sort of becoming is more, it's really kind of attracting newer authors in a lot of ways, because a lot of the things I had to do to start out are things that I'm interested in sharing with people. And just like you, like I knew what a beta reader was when I wrote my first book back in 2015, but I didn't know all of the details you're telling me, which is why I think it's really important for people. And as time goes and you're learning things, you forget what you didn't know before, especially if it's a big, if it's been, 6 or 7 years. And I'm like, when I saw your TikTok, it was so cute. Just like, everybody should go watch that TikTok. You should repost it. So if people go over, they can see, because it was a really cute TikTok. And it made me think of my sister, because I think she'd make a really good beta reader. She's a voracious reader. And she gives me very good feedback on my manuscripts. Again, we don't recommend family. I'm in a special situation here. And my sister, I'm very close with her, and she was my first reader aside from my husband. So she actually helped me get confident enough to actually publish my work. But we're in a routine now. Huh?
I said, that is a good beta reader. That is an excellent beta reader.
But what I do too, and I think this helps her, and I think you probably do this too, is I tell her what I need feedback for. And I know that some people have asked her, like she's done a lot of volunteer beta reading for people. She's like one of her friends who actually, I think she could do it professionally. Some people have put a big ask on her for free. Like they send long lists of questions and things. She's like, you never sent me. I was like, I don't expect you to do all that labor for me for free. I want you to read it, and anything that stands out to you. And plus the other thing is that with her beta reading, I just want glaring examples of problems from her. Like I don't want her to go and do too much work. I want her to what is the enjoyment factor? So it's not even really like 100% beta reading. It's like beta sister reading, which must be a category into itself. But I think hiring a beta reader, just like hiring an editor and hiring a cover designer, if you can't do your own covers, are things that are really important to do, because then you have somebody like you who's not emotionally invested in that relationship, and you have a system. Tell us about your system for when you intake an author.
Yeah, so kind of like what I was talking about before, usually what happens is what will happen is I will get contacted. I haven't yet had anybody, like I haven't yet have a client who then recommended me to a friend, and then the friend came to me. I haven't yet had that happen, but I have had a lot of authors come to me through direct messages, usually either on my Instagram or on my TikTok, that will contact me, and they'll ask me if I'll beta read for them. But kind of like what we were talking about before, you got to make sure that you're going to be a good fit, because you don't want to get caught up, like the author doesn't want to get caught up in a scenario where they have a beta reader that will not give them the feedback that they're looking for, or worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, they'll stop reading in the middle. I've not done that because I'm stubborn and want to finish, even if I didn't enjoy a manuscript, which hasn't happened yet. So I personally would finish because I have to finish.
It's a job. This is another thing, is it's a job you've been hired to do.
Yes.
I mean, we all have parts of our jobs we don't like.
Precisely.
And do you ever have anybody who has unrealistic expectations?
You know, that is a really good question. I am positive that there are people out there who have had experiences like that. I had been very fortunate thus far to not have that. I have had one client, they wanted feedback from me, and I they wanted the beta reading job, and I was like, that's perfect. So we went through, they told me about their story, they asked me for certain types of feedback, and I went through and I did that. And by the time I had finished reading, I had forgotten the specific feedback that they had wanted. So I had to go back to them and ask them what they wanted again. And I sent them a couple of different letter format emails with my feedback, because first I sent it and then I needed to readdress what they wanted. And so it was just like, it was kind of a little bit of a mess on my end. But they got extra feedback from me. And then after I finished my 2 letter emails that I sent them with the feedback that they were looking for, they also came back and they asked me, they had a long list of questions that they wanted my opinion on. And I was perfectly willing to answer all of that, but it was an extra amount of time and an extra step that I did have to take. I didn't mind at all. I really enjoyed the book and I really enjoyed working with this client, but it's just something that, for future reference for authors, if you are expecting to have a conversation with your beta reader after they've finished and after they've sent you the feedback, you should probably tell them that closer to the beginning, just so that they have an expectation that you're going to want to continue the conversation.
Or even if you don't know that you're going to expect to pay for that time.
Yes.
Just like you would like for me, I do some things, like I'm a social media manager in my regular job and stuff, and I know that there are times that if it's like a 5-minute thing, I just do it, whatever. But if it's going to take me 15 to 20 minutes or longer, that's time that needs to get charged, because not only are you doing the thing, you're gearing up to do the thing, and then you're winding down from doing the thing, and then you have the follow-up stuff that you have to do with the thing. So yeah, it's definitely the kind of thing that you should expect. And sometimes people don't know, they just don't know, like, maybe this person just didn't know that's not, and maybe even you, because you're pretty new at doing it professionally, maybe you just hadn't set that boundary yet. And I think that this is all a process as we learn. Like the big publishers and stuff, they have all this stuff down pat. They've been doing it forever. But for the rest of us, we are really learning how to support each other. And I think beta reading is a wonderful way to support authors with professional beta reading. That is a worthy, noble thing. I think that is a job, that's something that we need, trustworthy, quality beta readers. And so I appreciate it as a concept and as a career choice. And I know that you're on Instagram and you're on TikTok, because that's where I found you. And what are your @, both of those places?
They're both, I have a pretty unique spelling to my first name, so I was lucky enough to be able to tag the same handle for both places, but my handle for both Instagram and TikTok are @Christyn West.
CHRISTYNWEST.
Yes,
on TikTok and on Instagram, and people can reach you through there for
yes.
Okay.
And if they want to DM me and ask to email me rather than direct messaging, because some people prefer that, then as long as they DM me, I'll be totally happy to give my email out too.
Okay, so from the perspective of if somebody wants to be a let's say a person they love to read, they have decent reading comprehension, they have a pretty good grasp of story arcs and things like that, or at least feel that they do. How would a person get started being a professional beta? What are the basic steps to just get your toes wet and doing it professionally, leaping from I would think that you would at least want to try it as a hobby first to see if you even like it.
Yes.
But if you could tell us,
for everybody.
tell us
so
that.
Yeah, with that, so for me, what happened for me, I started I have been on TikTok for over a year. I had not been posting content, but I was viewing content. And so when I moved this summer, because my husband had a job over the summer and we were in this one place for just a couple of months, I was like, you know what, when we move here, I'm going to officially start my TikTok account, because as a writer myself, I want to have a following for when my own books become published one day, hopefully. So when I started doing that, I had, like I said earlier, I had no idea what a beta reader was. I had never heard the term before. And so when I started getting onto Book Talk specifically, instead of just generic TikTok, I heard the term thrown around, and actually I figured out what it was. And I was like, you know what, that sounds like something I can do, because I have a degree in creative writing. So I realized that throughout my entire college career with the creative writing classes that I was taking, I had been a beta reader for people. In creative writing classes, they have you write the manuscript and then you hand it out to your classmates so that they can read it and critique it and discuss it, which is essentially what beta reading is.
Yeah. So
because I had been doing that for my entire college career, I was like, you know what, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
Let's try. Let's just
it's in my wheelhouse.
Yes. And so I just, like, one morning I was trying to figure out what my content, what my video that I was going to make for that day was going to be, and came up with my application beta reader videos, which I think you're right, I should repost. So I'll repost those. Yeah. I just came up with the first one, and it just kind of exploded on Book Talk. So, like, I wouldn't say that it went viral, because it definitely didn't, but it went viral within my itty bitty Book Talk community.
And I wasn't following you when I saw it. I didn't know who you were. Yeah. And it came through my For You page, and I had hardly any follow. I mean, I was fairly new to TikTok when I saw it. So yeah, clearly you're hitting the people that.
So I honestly just saw it, thought it looked cool, thought it looked like something I could do, and made a video. And then here I am 4 months later with this as my career. So to go back to your question of how to get into it for people who want to try it out, just start advertising, start telling your friends, like, hey, I wouldn't mind reading this for you. Or because I would probably start, like you said, as a hobby first to see if you like it, and then work on making it a career if that's something that you'd want to do. But I just honestly just said over and over and over again in my videos, I beta read and I talk about it. And that has gotten me quite a few clients from all over the world. Like, I had one client who, I think she was originally from Argentina. I think she's somewhere from South America originally. I had another client who lives in Scotland, and I beta read for her and her co-author this summer, and their book just came out a couple of weeks ago, or not even a couple of weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago. And so I'm I've been in this long enough that books that I have beta read for are now getting published, which is just the coolest thing. So it's really cool to get into it. I would highly recommend it to anybody who likes reading and has all of the criteria that I was recommending earlier. Totally recommend getting into it, because it is such an excellent and really fulfilling career path. I had no expectations of finding this job when I first started, but here I am happily beta reading, and it's just an excellent job, and I love it so much.
So if an author comes to you with a average 80K to 100K novel manuscript and gives it to you, what is the length of time it takes to, is there a lot of criteria, like if they want mega feedback, if they want just like certain points, like how do you determine how long it will take to get you know, like if they're like,
Yeah.
I have to have this into my editor in 2 weeks or whatever.
So that's a great question. I haven't, I want to say something that's incorrect. Okay. So usually whenever I'm talking to my clients, I tell them right off the bat, it's going to take me about 3 weeks to get back to you. Okay. I don't usually like reading more than 2 manuscripts, maybe 3 at once, because while I have no problem switching back and forth between stories, like it doesn't bother me at all. I grew up reading many books at once because that's what my school curriculum required of me. So I don't have any issue jumping between stories, but I want to give every manuscript the time that it deserves. So I don't usually like reading more than 2 at a time. So I always say to my authors that it's going to be about 3 weeks. I try to get it back to them sooner than that, but you know, it takes a long time to read, especially if it's, you know, almost a 700-page manuscript.
Yeah. Well, that's double almost a regular.
Yes. I had one of my clients had her manuscript that she sent to me was like 678 pages long, and she needed it back to her editor by a certain date, and she had given me plenty of time. Like she sent it to me like 3 weeks in advance, but because I was in the middle of reading other manuscripts, it just got moved to the very end of the 3 weeks. It happens, you know, sometimes unforeseen circumstances happen, or it just takes a little bit longer with some manuscripts. It just entirely depends.
And you know, you're in line.
Yeah, exactly. So hers ended up waiting until the end of her 3-week time period that I gave her. I'm never doing that to myself again. 678 pages to read in a week. Oh, don't do that to yourself. Her manuscript was fantastic. And even though I was reading, some of the days I think I read like 8 hours a day, because that's just how long it took. It was so worth it. The story was excellent, and it's getting published next month, which is super exciting. But yeah, so that usually 3 weeks is how long I tell my authors it's gonna take. And then if it does end up taking longer, like I had to move this summer and I couldn't get back to some people as soon as I wanted to. So because of that, I had one person who was waiting for a really long time for me to get back to them, and thankfully they were very understanding. But you know, stuff happens, life happens. So you have to, as a beta reader, need to be flexible, and authors also need to understand that beta readers are human too, and they've got other things going on outside of that, just like any other job.
Right. So approximately 3 weeks is for most of them. And you don't like to do more than 2 at a time. I know there are some people out there that can read tremendous amounts of words. I always feel like a slug compared to some of these book Instagrammers and book talkers. I'm like, how did you read 500 books in a year? That's just doesn't, you know, I just don't understand that.
Did you do anything else with your time?
I know. I mean, I have to get a little Netflix time in. I'm serious. And I mean,
video games. I get it. I
do. And my friend is really pushing me to watch Ted Lasso. And I just, because of the book fest, I haven't had time. And she's like really wanting me to watch Ted Lasso so that she can talk to me about it. But I'm like, I just don't have time right now, but I promise I'm going to do Ted Lasso. So I'm sure everybody who's watched Ted Lasso loves it, knows exactly what she's talking about. But so that's really interesting. Now, I did ask you, just for our viewers here who have stopped by, I wanted to tell them that you are going to come give a workshop. Maybe you could even do like more than one if it's not too much imposing. Like maybe you could do one with some worksheets for authors, and then come back and do another salon workshop for people who want to get into beta reading professionally, like what your sheets look like and how you manage your time and those kinds of things. And I think that would be super helpful for people who want to get into this. We have mostly authors in my group. So what I'm specifically talking about is Christyn has agreed to come do a salon at the Right Women Network, which is a private Facebook group it's a private Facebook group, the Right Women Network, WRITE, and I will put the info links and whatever in the video. But that is a women's writing salon group. I don't see any reason people who aren't just book lovers or interested in writing or interested in beta reading or editing or any aspect of publishing can't come be part of that group. So if you're a woman and you're in the publishing industry in some area, you are invited to join the group. You have to request because it is a private group, and we try to keep it a kind of a safe space. And we are very excited that Christyn's going to come do that, and that will be a live event instead of a recorded one, and you'll just have to join the group and watch. There'll probably be maybe December for one of them. And so if you're interested in beta reading from either side, we just talked about this earlier. And so I was like, well, we got to figure out what your salon's going to be if you're willing to do it. And so she's willing. Yes. So we'll get those details in the group as to, and you can even give us feedback about what you would like to hear or what you would like her to present. Absolutely. And we will do that. And we'll probably do it on Zoom, so people who don't have aren't regularly on Facebook or whatever can also enjoy it. Or we might do Facebook Live. I haven't figured it out yet. You know, I like to just.
Either works for me.
Okay, great. We thank you so much for joining us. This is very informational. Beta reading is a little bit of a mystical area for some people on both sides, the authors and especially new authors and readers who maybe you're a reader and you came to the book fest because you love reading and you're like, I didn't even know this was a job that I could do. So follow us at the Right Women Network, or request to join the private Facebook group, the Right Women Network, and come see what kind of salon stuff that we're going to be doing. We had to suspend a lot of our salon stuff because of COVID. We've had done a couple we've done a couple via virtual, but it hasn't been quite the same. But we will continue now that I'm a lot more well versed since last year's all virtual book fest, that I can do these things now, and I'm comfortable doing them. So if you have any more questions, you can leave them in the comments. We will be checking the comments. If Christyn doesn't see them, I will let her know about them. So come to our, and since it'll be live, it'll be a Q&A. She'll be able to answer your questions that you have live, which would be wonderful. And we appreciate you so much for coming. I will put your contact information in the form, and everybody go look at her TikTok. She's going to repost her application to be a beta reader TikToks, because those are really fun. I enjoyed them. So
thank you.
Thank you so much.